Okay. We got our Fondo Soft. If you remember from the video I posted yesterday, there's the head. There's part of the torso. I did the hips a little bit earlier. Made spacing for where the legs are going to fit. This will all kind of get cleaned up and fill in. As I said before in the first video, you know, this is just a real rough, like, mock-up, just to kind of let everyone out there see just sort of generally how you would figure out a shaping. All this stuff is going to get cut, flattened. I'm going to flatten all of my edges just to make sure everything meets up. I've been sort of going through and kind of, you know, pushing on things from the inside out to, you know, work on that overall form just to get it so that it's the right shape. Sorry, I'm doing this. This is still a little tricky to figure out. It's like, you know, looking in a mirror or something. So I'm sure I'll figure it out soon enough. But yeah, so there we go. This is the rough sculpt for Himoon-kun, which we're going to be doing a contest for at some point, probably around the beginning of February. And we're going to put out a call for who's going to be the sculptor to sculpt the final version of Himoon-kun. So I think that'll be a fun way for all of you guys to see how an idea goes from sketch to, you know, a rough mock-up, and then from that rough mock-up to the final sculpt, and then from final sculpt into wax, and, you know, all that good stuff. So, figured we could maybe try do some legs, because I do legs. I mean, depending on the thickness of legs, I'll do them a little bit different. It really just depends on what's the kind of look and thing you're going for, but generally arms and legs, you know, tend to be a bit more longer, a bit more spindlier. So, you know, you work kind of like within what's it. Sorry. I should remember to take these out of the packaging before I start so the noise isn't too crazy. So, we're just going to kind of like rough out, you know, what might kind of be robotic-y looking legs. You know, for your standard robot legs, they're going to be fairly uniformly cylindrical. And they generally have these sort of like lines or, what is that? Like, you know, it looks like some spring is in there. It looks like some weird components are in there. So, you know, that's basically the, did I make them too thin? Nah. Okay, so then we'll just guess where half is. Those look to be about the same length. And then, let's see, I want to go. See if I can frame this up right. Okay, goes in there. Okay. So from here, you're just sort of looking at like kind of structural integrity of stuff. Does it look like it's super top heavy, or does it look like it's got a good kind of base to it? You know, again, you want to think about how the materials, once it transfers into vinyl, those, you know, the properties of vinyl and the physics are different on that than the properties and physics that are on this soft clay. So Sometimes there's a shape that works in soft clay, and then it transfers into toy, and it does not work. It falls over, or it's top heavy, or it's just, kind of funky. I'm kind of like pushing down on it just to sort of look at like where's level. Where does it look like it's kind of level? So, it's the clay is still very malleable, very soft and malleable, and still has a lot of flexibility to it. So as it hardens and dries, it'll kind of hold more in place, and that'll help you futz around with positionings, sculpting in your details. If you want to add or subtract, you would do that. You would do that all there. I like to kind of push in on the clay on the inside, because when that dries and it sort of fills in that void in there, it's going to act a little bit as a joint, or like a little bit of a plug that it'll kind of rest on. You can go back in and sculpt a joint in the clay so that it's a turnable joint that's a bit more playable and lets you see where things hit up against, or if something has some clearance issue, you could do that as well. And so I'm just kind of looking at, I'm also, as I'm squishing down, it's getting shorter. So you want to, you can move it up, elongate it. We're just looking for the kind of basic stance and pose. I'm sure this actually, I don't know how interesting this is to watch, because this is just sort of the, fiddly, futzy part that if you spend a little bit of time to figure it out at the very core of the sculpt, then anything that you do around it, all of your other little changes and stuff, those are easy workarounds. But when it's just sort of structurally all cattywampus at its core, it's just always hard to ever get that thing to, stand up. I do like a good sort of turn in a robot leg, like a bend at the knee kind of thing. I think it gives it a little bit more of a humanistic look. It's kind of like Bender from Futurama, which is just sort of a take on a old, those old B-movie robots that were clunky and funky, and there was like clearly a dude inside. So those are the kind of, I guess, images that I'm drawing from when I'm thinking about what this form is going to be, or what it might kind of take shape into. I have the drawings, that sketch that I posted on Instagram, Grody Shogun. You can look it up there and see. I'm going off of that drawing, so I'm going to try to stay kind of true to that. So there's kind of, putting in your basic form. I think it's getting a little, I think to try to do this at this angle, I'm getting a little wonky myself here, so let's see if we can't stretch these out a bit more. You want to keep, for stuff like arms, stuff like legs, you want to keep a good thickness. I mean, this is what is that? The thickness of my thumb, maybe a little bit smaller, maybe the thickness of my index finger. But you want to be able to pull these freely out of the metal molds. And oftentimes I find where people sculpt stuff that's just a little bit too hinky. This one's actually thinner than the other one by a little bit. But that's fine. I can always add stuff on later. But where projects get messed up, or where sculpts get a little bit flubbed up is when stuff is too thin and it's gonna tear, it's gonna rip, it's gonna just be a nightmare to pull out of the molds. And there are different limitations for different manufacturers. So that's why people will have stuff made in China as opposed to Japan, because China has, you can do much sort of like weirder shapes, or you can do much thinner shapes, much more elongated shapes, because the process is slightly different. And that's why whenever we talk about the difference between Sofubi or soft vinyl, I always contend that Sofubi is made in Japan, soft vinyl is made anywhere else in the world. I had a question on the last post asking that, so thank you for sending that in. Always a great question. I do, if you guys follow me on Instagram or you follow me in other places, I do tend to repeat things. So I have talked about this before, my opinion about that. So yeah, I think we're getting a little bit more in there. Horseshoes and hand grenades. I'm gonna let this dry up a little bit. I'm gonna put in some other details, and then I'll show you what it looks like kind of as a complete piece. I'm also gonna hopefully at some point figure out editing this stuff, so I'm not breaking it up like this. I'm breaking it up in easier to digest chunks, but bear with me. Okay, cool. Thanks guys. Let's see, I'm still yet to do a live where anyone has joined, so if you're seeing these, subscribe, follow, and jump in with any questions you got, anything that you want me to touch upon. That's what I'm here for. Oop, made you look. Punch in the arm. All right, guys, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.